Have you ever stood in the wind and felt as if the breath of God Himself was urging you forward? Faster, farther, beyond the reach of fear. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to run, not just with your feet, but with your heart, toward destiny itself? If you've ever pondered the mysteries of heaven, the unseen battles in the spiritual realm, or what truly happened before humanity's first breath, then pause for a moment and share this journey with us. Like this story, subscribe to the Bible Stories channel, and comment 777 if your spirit longs for truth that goes deeper than the surface. Your voice matters because you are part of a chosen generation seeking revelation. Now, let's step back 3,000 years into the ancient hills of Judah. The air is dry, yet alive with the smell of olive branches and the dust of marching feet. Israel is in turmoil, Saul's reign is crumbling, and David, the shepherd, who became a warrior, is rising toward the throne God promised him. Yet, as in every chapter of history, there is more here than kings and crowns. There are families, bloodlines, choices, and destinies written in both courage and grief. In one such family, courage was not just a trait, it was the family signature. David's sister raised 3 sons, whose names would come to resound in the annals of Israel's might. Joab, the commander's mind and iron discipline. Abishai, fierce, impulsive, a lion-hearted fighter. And Asahel, the youngest, yet destined to be remembered, not for strength, but for something even rarer among warriors. Speed, not the simple kind that wins races in the village square, but the kind that echoes through the scripture, as swift as a wild gazelle in the open field. From his earliest days, Asahel would run across the hills, not for sport, but because something in his soul was compelled to chase the horizon. He was the boy who could vanish from the sight of his brothers in seconds. The sound of his sandals, little more than a heartbeat in the wind. He trained alongside Joab and Abishai, his eyes absorbing every sword drill, every war story told around the fire, how David felled Goliath, how the Philistines trembled before seasoned men like Benaiah and Eliab. His young heart wasn't fueled by vanity. It burned with longing to stand in the same circle of heroes, to prove that his swiftness was not just a gift, but a weapon. The house of Zeruiah was forged in hardship. Loyalty to David was their compass, and battle, their daily labor. With Saul's grasp slipping from power and the nation fractured between loyalties, every man had to decide whom to serve, knowing that such a choice could demand everything, perhaps even their life. For Asahel, the decision was already anchored. David was God's chosen king, and Asahel would serve him, not as a spectator, but as a fighter. As the tension between David's camp in Hebron and Saul's remnant in the north deepened, Asahel's time came sooner than expected. Saul's death did not bring peace. Rather, it birthed a fragile and dangerous rivalry. Saul's son Ishbosheth sat as king over Israel, placed there by Abner, the old commander of Saul's army. David reigned over Judah, but between the 2 halves of the nation, bitterness simmered like an untended fire. And so, war began to gather in the shadows long before swords clashed in the open. When the call came, Asahel stood ready, not simply as Joab's fast little brother, but as a man prepared to test his own steel. The battlefield was set at Gibeon, David's troops under Joab's watchful command, Ishbosheth's forces under Abner's seasoned leadership. The air was thick, nearly tangible with the weight of unspoken hatred. This was more than territory. This was the question of Israel's future. Which king, which house, which God-blessed cause would survive? We sometimes read these passages in scripture and miss the reality. The smell of leather armor baking in the sun, the tense shifting of shields in warriors' hands, each man searching another's eyes to measure where courage ends and desperation begins. In that atmosphere, Asahel moved silent within himself, but lightning in the legs. The moment the first war cry split the sky, he surged forward. His speed was breathtaking, slipping between soldiers like water around stones, ducking blade arcs, leaping over the wounded, cutting through the chaos as though driven by some unseen hand. And yet, here lies the line where biblical narrative meets the truth of human nature. A gift from God, when untamed, can become a snare. Asahel's swiftness, this divine edge that separated him from other men, was pure. But when joined with youth's hunger for recognition, it had the power to blur judgment. It is here that Psalm 19 whispers to our present-day hearts, "Who can discern his own errors? Cleanse me from hidden faults. Keep back your servant from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me." Asahel's heart was courageous, but he was stepping into a lesson many of us still wrestle with, that zeal without wisdom can invite tragedy. That day at Gibeon, in the shifting chaos, Asahel's eyes locked onto one man, Abner. Abner was no random enemy. He was a pillar of Saul's military might, a strategist, a survivor, older, stronger, more experienced than almost any man on that field. Facing Abner was not just a tactical decision. It was, for Asahel, an act heavy with meaning. To defeat Abner would be to prove himself in the most undeniable way. To face him and live would echo across both camps. Pride, perhaps subtle, and the longing to be more than the young runner propelled Asahel forward. Abner heard him before seeing him, the patter of relentless footsteps closing in. He glanced back and recognized the face and the family line. His mind, with the speed of a soldier who'd fought decades of battles, measured the situation. He knew Asahel was skilled for his age, but not seasoned for a duel like this. And he called out, "Turn aside to the right or to the left. Fight one of the younger men instead. Why should I strike you down?" This was no mockery. It was mercy in the mouth of an enemy. Abner did not want Joab's vengeance bound to the inevitable outcome of such a chase. But Asahel would not be turned. His focus had boiled down to a single point in the world. The man ahead of him. Each heartbeat said faster. Each breath said now. Many of us in our own spiritual battles have felt this. The tunnel vision that makes us deaf, even to God's own warnings, when we are convinced our cause is right. Proverbs 14 glows beside this scene. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. Abner called out again, more urgent now. "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How then could I look your brother Joab in the face?" Yet Asahel surged on. And here scripture and life both remind us, sometimes wisdom appears as retreat. Sometimes turning aside is God's instruction, not cowardice. Asahel could not hear it. What happened next would be remembered, not just in the record of kings, but in the grief of brothers. Spinning suddenly, Abner gripped his spear differently, not the blade forward, but the buttoned A move rarely used to kill, meant more to disable. But the force, the timing, the momentum of both men colliding turned an intended check into a fatal strike. The shaft pierced Asahel, and he fell. The runner of Israel brought low, not by speed's failure, but by wisdom's absence. And for a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Soldiers who moments earlier swung swords froze. Men who could step over corpses without a flicker of thought stopped at the sight. Not for his rank, not even for his family, but because everyone knew Asahel was the one who ran like the wind. And now, the wind was gone. His body lay, as if still in motion, but utterly still, dust rising slowly around him. That moment, that sacred pause, is one the Spirit still presses upon believers today, to ask ourselves, where has our zeal run ahead of God's counsel? Where has eagerness outrun discernment? And are we willing, before a spear stops us, to slow down and hear His voice? For the steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord, and only in His order is our safety. The dust of Gibeon still hung in the air as the sun leaned westward, casting long shadows over broken spears and still bodies. The shouting had dimmed into scattered pockets of resistance, but the weight of the day pressed down like a stone upon the chest of every soldier. Somewhere, a raven cried, and in the center of that field, Asahel lay where he had fallen. The men of David's army moved with hesitation around the body of the young runner. These were battle-hardened warriors, men who had stepped over the fallen 100 times without flinching, yet none could step over him. To pass beside Asahel felt different, as if the wind itself had been trapped in his limp frame, refusing to move on. Silent respect spread among them, unspoken but trembling in the air. We often imagine warriors as men without tears, but Scripture reminds us that even mighty men wept. David and all the people wept aloud, until they had no strength left to weep. To Samuel 1:12, in times like this, grief was not weakness, it was holy. The battlefield itself seemed to mourn. The sound of the breeze through the hills of Gibeon was like the faint footfalls of a man who could no longer run. Far across the chaos, Joab and Abishai had not yet heard the news. They were still in formation, commanding men, answering cries for orders, their minds fixed on strategy. Battle strips a man of awareness of the bigger picture. The mind narrows to what's before him, the swing of a sword, the call of an ally, the next wave to hold back. But then, Over the noise, a runner approached. Not a runner like Asahel. This one was heavy-footed, burdened by news he did not wish to carry. His eyes avoided theirs. His lips struggled to form the words. When he finally spoke, it was as though the air itself recoiled. "Your brother has fallen." They did not cry out, not yet. Some griefs are too large to fit into words. Joab looked at Abishai. Neither commander nor soldier now, just brother to the same blood. This was more than the loss of an ally in war. It was the tearing of life from life. Abishai's eyes boiled with disbelief and rage. Joab's became still, too still. They walked to him, not as leaders, but as siblings pacing the longest steps of their lives. And then, there he was, Asahel, still clothed in the dust of his pursuit, the grip of battle frozen on his hands, but his chest unmoving. For a long while, they only looked at him. Abishai knelt first, his hand pressed against the soil. His voice was low, almost a growl. An ache turned into breath. Joab stood, face unreadable, yet inside, a storm uncoiling. And there, something eternal took root. It was not simply grief, it was the seed of revenge. We who read these things centuries later may feel tempted to judge, but let us remember, the human heart in the heat of loss does not easily know the way to release. The Psalms themselves hold the raw cries of the bereaved. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Psalm 13:2, 1-2. Joab's heart was not ready for the counsel of patience. His soul had already begun drafting a covenant with revenge. Yet for now, there was only the solemn duty to bring him home. The men lifted Asahel's body, in the manner one might carry a prince, and began the long walk back. The path to Bethlehem was silent, except for the shuffle of boots and the creak of leather armor. No jesting, no boasting, no recounting of battle feats. Grief had silenced every tongue. That night, campfires burned low. Warriors lay awake, staring into embers. Even the young men who had only known Asahel briefly felt the emptiness of his absence. They had watched him dart through camp like a breath of fresh wind, seen his smile flash in victory, heard the echo of his laughter after a long day's training. Those echoes were gone. We often imagine that the enemy is only the one across the battlefield. But here, the enemy was also within loss, bitterness, the gnawing thought that perhaps this could have been avoided. Abner had been an enemy that day, yes, and he had struck the blow. But the more dangerous adversary for Joab and Abishai was the unseen one, the spirit of vengeance whispering in their hearts. They reached Bethlehem on the second day, arriving as dawn's pale light crept over stone walls and olive groves. A grave was prepared with care. Men who had fought beside him, and even some who had known his name only from camp whispers, gathered for the burial. The mood was heavy, but respectful. No long speeches, only the sound of earth falling. Joab stood at the foot of the grave, eyes cold, not because he did not feel, but because he felt too much. Abishai's jaw was tight, cheeks wet despite himself. Then the last of the soil was pressed down, and the living stepped back. They returned to their duties in David's army. But the air between them and the rest of the men had shifted. Joab's commands grew sharper, his eyes more watchful. Abishai's patience wore thin, his eagerness for a fight sharpened against the stone of his pain. And beyond the battlefield, a larger political storm brewed. For while the brothers mourned, David was seeking peace. His heart, the same heart that once spared Saul in the cave out of reverence for the Lord, longed for the unification of Israel without more blood. Abner, Saul's old commander, still served Ishbosheth in the north, but his own loyalty was beginning to crack. The power of Saul's house was waning. The pull toward David's throne was growing. We must pause here for a truth. God's purposes for nations often unfold alongside very human tensions. The Lord's plan for David to reign over all Israel was certain, but the way there would pass, through the jagged terrain of betrayal, alliance, and vengeance. In the months that followed, news reached Joab that Abner was visiting David, not as an enemy, but as a guest in peace talks. Abner had pledged to help bring all Israel under David's rule. To the king, this was providence. To Joab it was treachery. Not treachery against David, but against Asahel's memory. That was the day Joab's quiet grief hardened into open resolve. If the king would not hold Abner to account for blood, then Joab would, unofficially, privately, without blessing, counsel, or the permission of heaven. What Joab could not see, And what we so often fail to see when driven by pain is that God does not need our revenge to establish his justice. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. Romans 12:19. But to a man still tasting the bitterness of loss, that verse often feels delayed, and so the trap was set. Joab sent word to Abner, a message clothed in politeness, promising further talk, a quiet meeting. Abner, believing this to be an ordinary part of negotiations, returned. Perhaps he even thought Joab had set aside their enmity in service of David's greater cause. But Joab's heart had long ceased to listen to causes greater than his own. Away from public eyes, there was no battle cry, no clash of shields, just a swift, final act. Joab's hand delivered the spear's edge that Gibeon had left unfinished. In that moment, the debt in his eyes was paid. Yet, if you have lived long enough, you know that such debts, once paid in blood, do not vanish. They only deepen the wound. When word reached David, his sorrow was raw and public. The king wept for Abner, as though for a brother, declaring before all, I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord, forever of the blood of Abner, son of Ner. His cry was not only for a man lost, but for the unity endangered by act. Joab said little. Abishai said nothing at all. For them the matter was closed, but the spiritual truth was far from closure. Sin begets sin, and even grief, if left untended before God, can bear the bitter fruit of destruction. And so, in the shadow of Asahel's grave, two wars continued. One was the war between nations, ending slowly as David's reign was established over a united Israel. The other, quieter but more enduring, was the war inside the human soul. The struggle to surrender pain into God's hands before it shapes us into the very image of the enemy we oppose. The seasons turned slowly over Israel. The fields where Asahel had run so swiftly began to grow wildflowers again. The hills of Gibeon, once heavy with the cries of war, now lay under the hum of cicadas and the distant bleating of sheep. From a distance, it could have seemed as though peace had returned, but inside the hearts of those who had known him, Asahel's absence was an unhealed scar. Some men measure history in years, others measure it in the faces they can no longer see. In the army camp, there was still a space at the morning meal where the youngest son of Zeruiah had once sat, chin lifted with eagerness to hear the latest war stories. On the training fields, there were tracks in the dust that seemed to vanish too soon, as though even the earth itself could not keep up with his stride. It is said that certain lives are like a flame, short-lived but blindingly bright. In the months after that battle at Gibeon, the name Asahel took on a life of its own. Around campfires, young men told of the runner who could catch even the wind. They told how his sandals hardly wore out, how he could chase a deer across the hills until it stumbled, how his laughter still seemed to ride on the breeze. They spoke of his courage, but the elders, with heavier eyes, added the other part. His courage had no bridle. And so, without anyone writing a single word, his story began to take the shape of a proverb. In the villages of Judah, mothers would call to adventurous sons, remember Asahel, when they saw them run recklessly toward trouble. Among the warriors, the phrase faster than Asahel became a compliment, but also a warning, a way of asking, are your feet outrunning your wisdom? This is how it happens in our own lives, isn't it? We hear of someone gifted, passionate, unstoppable, and part of us wants to be like them. But if we are wise, we will listen to the whole story, not just the splendor of their gifts, but also the cautionary truth of where those gifts, untethered, can lead. The Apostle Paul once wrote, each of us should learn from the things that were written before, so that through endurance and the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. Hope does not only come from stories with happy endings. Sometimes it comes from stories that show us the cost of haste, so that we, ourselves, do not become the next cautionary tale. The years drew on. David's reign widened. The walls of Hebron, once the seat of a divided kingdom, now echoed with the noise of administration, festival preparations, and the laughter of children who had never seen Saul's house or heard the dread of Philistine trumpets. But David's inner circle did not forget. Benaiah would speak of Asahel in tones of admiration when training new recruits. Eleazar would shake his head and tell them he was as fearless as the spring storm, and just as quick to get ahead of himself. And sometimes, when the day's work was heavy and the king himself passed through the barracks, there would be a moment, brief but deep, when David's eyes would grow distant. For in David's heart, the death of a man like Asahel was not just a soldier's loss, but a reminder of the fragile line between victory and tragedy in the service of God. You see, the kingdom could move on politically, but spiritually. Asahel's death demanded reflection. And reflection in God's people always has a purpose: to form the moral marrow of the next generation. For the story of Asahel was never only about one young man and one fatal chase. It was, in the deeper telling, a mirror for every servant of God who burns with zeal. Zeal is a fire from heaven, but ungoverned fire will consume more than it purifies. We remember that Elijah called down fire from heaven, but he also outran a chariot because the hand of the Lord was upon him. In Elijah, the fire and the speed worked in harmony with God's will. In Asahel, the fire of courage burned hotter than the tempering wisdom that could have kept him alive. One night, long after Joab's private act of vengeance against Abner, a group of young soldiers, gathered by a low-burning fire outside the walls. They were new to the king's service. One of them, a wiry lad with quick feet, asked an older veteran why the men spoke less in Joab's presence than they did with other commanders. The veteran looked into the fire a long while before answering. Because, he said slowly, some men carry battles on their shoulders. Joab carries a grave. He told them of that day at Gibeon, of how a chase turned to a death, of the stillness in the dust, of how even hardened fighters would not step over Asahel's body. He told them how Joab had changed after that, not in skill, for he was still the sharpest mind on the field, but in the way no celebration could fully reach his eyes. The men listened in silence, and without knowing it, they were learning another lesson from Asahel's story, that the cost of untempered zeal is not only paid by the one who falls, but by everyone who loves them. In time, the field at Gibeon became a kind of unmarked memorial. Shepherds led their flocks across it. Travelers took the road that skirted its edge. But the older soldiers, when passing by, would slow their pace, as if the air there was heavier. A few claimed that in the earliest light of morning, they could almost hear the echo of running feet, swift and sure, chasing some invisible horizon. Perhaps it was only the wind playing tricks over the hills. Or perhaps, as many believed, it was the Lord's way of keeping Asahel's memory alive. And then, woven into the very fabric of Israel's warrior culture, his name appeared on the roll of David's mighty men, not for commanding armies, nor for saving the king in some desperate siege, but for the rare way he embodied both the glory and the peril of great gifts. That list, preserved for generations, would ensure that whenever the young men read it, they would see his name and ask, who was Asahel? And they would hear the story again. The telling of the story never ended without its moral pause. Some said softly, run fast, but run wisely. Others quoted Proverbs. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Thus the story became more than memory. It became mentorship from the grave. Even Joab, who never spoke Asahel's name lightly, carried the memory into every engagement. If he was ever quick to order a pursuit, he would fix his eyes on the pursuing men with an intensity that left no question. He would not lose another brother to unchecked zeal. His own hands were far from innocent, yet in this, perhaps, Asahel's life tempered him in ways no one else could. Abishai, on the other hand, let the grief drive him toward greater boldness. In every battle afterward, his charges were fierce, and his sword relentless. Yet he, too, began to pause when the enemy before him was not truly his to kill. The memory of Abner's warning to Asahel had slowly done its work in him. Not all fights are meant for you, no matter your strength. And we, centuries later, are left with the same dividing line drawn in the dust that day at Gibeon. In our own callings, in ministry, in personal battles, even in our defense of truth, there comes a moment where speed tempts us to ignore warning. We tell ourselves, I can handle it, I am ready, I am right. But the Spirit echoes Abner's plea, turn aside, why should I strike you down? It is mercy, not cowardice, that sometimes tells us to retreat. And so Asahel's story stands, not shrouded in sentiment, but blazing with the living wisdom of God, that gifts are not protection, that courage must walk with counsel, that even the swiftest cannot outrun the need for discernment. For in the race of faith, it is not the fastest who win, it is those who finish in God's appointed time. Night had fallen over Hebron, and the city slept under a blanket of stillness. Only the watchman's occasional steps broke the hush. In one shadowed courtyard near the military quarters, a lone figure sat awake. His armor was set aside. His sword leaned against the wall, drying from the day's heat. Joab's eyes were open, but they were not looking at the present. They were fixed far away, somewhere between memory and regret. Though the regret had no voice, the deed was done. Blood had been spilled, not in the roar of battle, but in the quiet treachery of a private meeting. No witnesses but God. To the outside world, Joab appeared unchanged. Still the commander, still loyal to David, still the man whose strategies won wars. But inside, something had shifted like a stone sliding into the deep. He remembered Asahel smile, the dust trailing like smoke behind his running feet, and the stillness of his body in Gibeon's field. That image had been the forge in which Joab's rage was shaped. He had believed that killing Abner would quench that fire. But now, in the glow of the torch beside him, Joab discovered the strangest thing. The fire still burned. We think revenge will satisfy. We imagine that exacting a debt will somehow restore what was stolen. But vengeance, though it often wears the voice of justice, is thirsty. It drinks blood and remains parched, for it cannot bring the dead back or heal the living heart. Joab was beginning to taste that bitterness, though he would not name it. The next morning, the city awoke to word of Abner's death. Whispers ran like water through the streets. Some called it justice, others called it betrayal. David, when he heard, tore his garments, wept loudly, and commanded that Abner be buried with honor. Standing among the mourners, the king's voice broke as he declared before all, "I and my kingdom are innocent before the Lord, forever of the blood of Abner, son of Ner." Joab heard every word. It was not only a public statement, it was a line drawn, separating the king's heart from the commander's hand. For a brief moment, Joab wondered if he had gone too far. But pride, that silent, unyielding guard, stood at his gate and allowed no particularment. He told himself he had done what needed to be done. Yet even the most resolute men cannot keep the conscience entirely silent. There were nights when sleep fled, and Joab found himself staring at the roof beams above, hearing in the distance the echoes of Asahel's footfalls, not in laughter, not in training, but in pursuit of Abner. Moments before the end, Abishai, too, felt the change. His brother was still by his side in battle, still decisive, still unflinching. But there was a heaviness that clung to Joab now, the way morning fog clings to the ground even after sunrise. You could win a campaign with him, but you could not lighten his mood. For Abishai, revenge had felt cleaner in the moment. Abner's death seemed like a full stop to the unfinished sentence of Asahel's murder. But over time, he realized that his battles brought no more lasting joy than before, and in quieter hours, the loss remained just as sharp. Both brothers had learned the hardest truth of all. Vengeance does not end grief. It merely buries it deeper, where it becomes harder to surrender to God. One evening, David summoned Joab privately. Whether it was the weight of politics or genuine concern that prompted it, no one knew, but the words are remembered. "Joab," the king began slowly, "do you know what kind of man you are to me?" Joab's eyes narrowed, unsure of the direction. "You are strength to this kingdom," David continued, "and you are danger to yourself." It was not accusation. It was lament. The king understood, perhaps better than anyone, what it meant to be driven both by loyalty and by deep personal hurt. David himself had been chased, maligned, betrayed. He knew the urge for personal justice, but he also knew what it meant to leave that justice in the Lord's hands. Joab, however, was a man of the sword, and swords are not patient instruments. David ended with only this: "The Lord will repay each man for his own wrongdoing." Whether Joab heard that as a warning or simply as a truth spoken into the air, no one could say. There is a reason the scriptures speak so boldly about the danger of an unchecked heart. Hebrews 12:15 warns us, "See to it that no root of bitterness grows up to cause trouble and defile many." A root grows underground, unseen, silently winding itself deeper. Joab's root had started in a brother's grave and grown until it bore the fruit of calculated murder. And once such a root is established, its shadow spreads over every decision. In the following years, Joab would continue to be indispensable to David's throne, defeating enemies, securing borders, putting down rebellions. But there were moments when his judgment crossed the line of obedience, when his personal sense of justice outweighed the king's commands. Observers could not always connect those choices to Asahel's death, but the heart does not forget. Its oldest wounds, unhealed grief, shapes us, often more than victories do. For Joab, the inner war never ended. We often read these ancient histories as if they were only political chronicles, but they are mirrors. Joab's story holds its reflection up to us, asking, what wounds are still shaping your steps? What pain have you kept alive in the name of justice when the Lord has asked for trust? Like Joab, we can be both loyal to God's cause and yet carrying something in our hearts that resists God's ways. We may win battles in service to Him, but inside, we are fighting another war entirely. Sometimes it is hidden from every eye but is dot in the quiet moments. Joab would sometimes pass through Bethlehem. Whether it was duty, patrol, or personal pilgrimage, he would slow near the burial place of his brother. Some say that on those days, his commands to the troops were sharper, his discipline harsher. Others say his jaw would simply tighten, and he would walk on in silence. If he prayed there, no one heard. Yet the irony remains. Asahel's life, marked by boldness and speed, had once inspired others to be courageous. But Joab's answer to that life, vengeance, had become the seed of his own heaviness. It is here the heart trembles at the thought. What if Asahel, had he lived, would have counseled patience? What if the young runner would have told his older brother to lay down the spear of revenge and live? We will never know, but God knows, and His word to every generation remains. Be still before the Lord, and wait patiently for Him. Refrain from anger, and forsake wrath. It leads only to evil. Psalm 37, 7-8, Joab did not, and it cost him peace for the rest of his days. If you've ever tasted that deep ache, that belief that something wrong must be answered by your own hand, Asahel and Joab's story stands as a quiet but urgent warning. Yes, courage is beautiful in God's sight, loyalty is precious, and love for family is honorable. But when those loves are wounded, only surrendering to God's justice can keep us from turning earthly weapons on eternal matters. The race of faith is not won the day we cross someone else's finish line. It is won when we cross the one God has marked for us in His time, in His way. Years passed in the kingdom of David, and the memory of Asahel, swift son of Zeruiah, did not fade with time. If anything, it grew, not because the wound of his death refused to heal, but because his story had moved beyond tragedy into something like instruction. He had become a proverb, a parable in motion, though his feet no longer ran dot in the training grounds outside Hebron. Later Jerusalem, young men sweated under the sun, learning sword sequences, shield work, formation drills, but every now and then, in the quiet moments between bouts, an instructor would point to a hill in the distance and say, Asahel could cross that before you even raised your shield. The younger ones would laugh, half in admiration, half in disbelief, and then the instructor's face would grow more serious. He could run fast, but speed will not save you if wisdom is not your companion. The lesson always came down to this: strength without discernment is like a chariot without reins, all momentum, no control. In the ranks of David's mighty men, this principle became almost sacred. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, famed for going down into a pit on a snowy day to kill a lion, would often tell new recruits, your gift is not your master. Strength, skill, speed, all are tools, but the craftsman must choose when to use them. A fool uses every tool at once. And then he would tell Asahel's story, how his zeal for the cause, his loyalty to the king, and his desire to prove himself were all good things. But, without the break of counsel, they led him to a moment he could not outrun. This telling of Asahel's life became as much a part of military tradition as any chant or battle drill. Beyond the barracks, the story was also told in the courts of wisdom. The priests and Levites, teaching the law, would speak of him to illustrate the difference between impulse and obedience. They would quote from Ecclesiastes, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance happened to them all. And they would explain, speed and strength are blessings, but it is obedience that draws the favor of God. Asahel's speed was a marvel, but speed alone could not bend the outcome of the moment God had already weighed. In this way, the young runner's story wove itself into the moral fabric of the nation. Still among the elite warriors, Asahel was not remembered with pity. They spoke of him with something more complex, a mix of admiration for his courage, warning for his lack of pause, and deep respect for the heart behind his actions. There was even a saying when a soldier charged too quickly in mock battle, called back your Asahel, meaning pull your speed into check before you rush headlong into danger. This was not mockery, it was mentorship, passed down in the currency of shared memory. Joab, in his own way, contributed to this legacy. Though his heart carried the unhealed wound of his brother's death, he treated Asahel's name with honor in the camp. When he gave orders before a pursuit, he would add words like, "And do not be reckless. We are not burying another Asahel." Today, the men understood. He was not only speaking as their commander, he was speaking as a brother who had buried one too soon. And so Asahel's life, short, bright, unfinished, began to function like a compass. In battle, it warned, "Do not let zeal run ahead of orders." In life, it reminded, even the purest intention needs the counsel of God. For Israel was not just building walls and winning wars, they were becoming a people shaped by the hand of the Lord. And the Lord was after hearts that could be both bold and teachable. There is a strange mercy in how God uses both triumph and tragedy to shape his people. The fall of Asahel could have been nothing more than a dark footnote in the nation's story. Instead, it became a reference point for the next generation, a reminder that calling is not proven by how fast you start, but by whether you finish in the way God intended. Doesn't the New Testament echo this in Hebrews 12? Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus. Not a race of reckless sprints, but a steady, obedient pace, eyes fixed on the one who marks the course. This is why Asahel's story still breathes all these centuries later. It does not simply tell us, "Don't rush." It tells us something richer. Your pace must be set by the one who called you. In the evenings, when the campfires burned low and the stars pressed close like watchful sentinels, old warriors would tell the tale one more time, not to mourn, but to teach. They would describe the day at Gibeon, the chase, the warnings, the fatal strike, and then they would fall silent for a moment. That silence was part of the lesson, a space for the hearers to weigh their own hearts. And invariably, one of the elders would end with, "Be as loyal as Asahel, be as bold as Asahel, but be wiser than Asahel." And perhaps this was the quiet redemption the Lord gave to the young runner, that his life and death would continue to guide the feet of his people, long after the dust of Gibeon had settled. For though Asahel's race ended suddenly in the field, the story of his race still runs in every soldier who tempers speed with strategy, in every servant of God who pairs zeal with prayer, in every believer who learns to ask, "Lord, is this the battle you have called me to fight?" In that way, Asahel still runs, and the wind through the hills still seems at times to carry the echo of his stride. The years rolled over Israel like waves against a shore. Kings rose, battles faded into memory. Generations were born who never knew the sound of Saul's trumpet or the cry of Philistine war horns. Yet in certain circles around campfires, in the low murmur of the barracks, in the halls where David's mighty men gathered, one name still brought an almost reverent pause. Asahel. To some, he was a hero whose swiftness was unmatched. To others, he was a reminder that raw zeal, without wisdom to guide it, can turn from gift to snare in a single heartbeat. And to a few his brothers, most of all, he was simply the boy who ran laughing through the hills long before war ever claimed his stride. It is a strange thing how a life so short can leave such a long shadow. His steps stopped in Gibeon, but the echo never fully died. It moved forward in the caution spoken to young soldiers. It whispered in the inmost places of men's hearts, when they weighed whether to charge ahead or wait for the Lord's signal, because that was the real legacy of Asahel, not merely his speed, but the reminder that pace is as important as direction in the race God sets before us. We often think of finish lines as the measure of victory, but faith teaches a deeper truth. The Apostle Paul wrote, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." Notice he did not say, "I ran the fastest, but I finished." Finishing, in God's kingdom, is not about being first, it is about being faithful. Asahel ran with everything he had, but the course he chose that day to chase Abner past every warning was not the course that would have led him to finish. His race ended on the wrong stretch of road, and that is the danger for every one of us, to confuse the intensity of our running with the certainty of God's call. In the decades after Asahel's death, Israel saw peace under David, then unrest again, and then the promise of Solomon's golden reign. Empires around them shifted, alliances changed, but in all those changes, the truth that Asahel's story carried remained. Gifts must be governed, zeal must have a shepherd, courage must be yoked to wisdom. For Joab and Abishai, The lesson came wrapped in grief and the iron taste of vengeance's aftermath. Joab would carry victories to his name that history still remembers, but also decisions that flowed from that same root of unresolved pain. Asahel would prove himself fearsome and loyal, yet tempered by a deeper caution in certain fights. Even so, both learned, and sometimes too late, that the cost of running without discernment can be paid again and again across the years. Generations later, elders in Israel still told Asahel's tale to teach the young. A veteran might lean forward, eyes fixed on the listening faces, and say, "Loyalty is as swift as your feet, but wisdom is the staff that keeps you on the right road. Without both, you will run far, but perhaps in the wrong direction." Others would add softly, "The strong man is not the one who never turns aside, but the one who knows when God is saying, 'Not this battle, not today.'" And for those of us walking the life of faith today, in boardrooms, in classrooms, in homes, in ministries, the battlefield may not be a valley outside Gibeon, but the principle stands unchanged. You see, there will always be Abners ahead of us, challenges, rivals, wrongs we feel must be set right. And often, we will feel that urge. I will close the gap. I will settle this now. But how many of those chases are actually from God? How many warnings do we run past, convinced our cause is holy, when in truth it is simply personal? The Spirit still calls to us, as Abner did to Asahel. Turn aside, this fight is not yours. It takes humility to listen. It takes surrender to obey. And it takes trust, deep, trembling trust, to believe that if the Lord says, "Leave this battle to me," then His justice will be better than ours. There is also something profoundly tender in Asahel's remembrance. His name on the list of David's mighty men was not erased, though others might have judged his end as foolish. God, through the preservation of that name, tells us this: "Your mistakes do not cancel the honor of your heart when it beats for me." Yes, his end was a warning, but his courage was real. His love for his king was sincere, and the God who numbers our steps also holds them in grace, even when our last step comes sooner than we thought. So his legacy remains twofold. For the young, and the young in faith, it is the beacon that says, "Run with passion, but keep your ear toward heaven." No speed can outrun his wisdom. For the seasoned especially, those carrying wounds, it is the gentle but firm reminder that vengeance and bitterness will not heal what was taken. Only God can restore, and only His justice satisfies without poisoning the soul. And perhaps, in the early dawn, when the hills of Gibeon blush with the first light, God still lets the wind move just a little faster across that ancient field. Perhaps it is His way of saying, "I remember the boy who ran. I remember his heart, and I am still teaching through his race." In the end, Asahel's story is not calling us to slow down out of fear. It is calling us to run in rhythm with the one who marks our course. It is calling us to pair bravery with listening, fervor with patience, and purpose with discernment. For in this life, we do not win by arriving first. We win by arriving faithful in God's time, in God's way, with the heart to hear Him when He says, "Now run," and the humility to stop when He says, "Turn aside." If Asahel's journey still speaks to your spirit, let it do its work. Let it inspire bold obedience, keep you from reckless pursuit, and remind you that the greatest victory is to finish the race He gave you, and to finish it with both courage and peace in your soul. And as you run your own race, may the Lord be the wind at your back, the voice in your ear, and the wisdom in your steps.